Hey everyone, it's Lisa Listen with Are You My Cousin? And it's time for another live stream where we can sit and talk about genealogy topics. You guys know I love to talk about genealogy, and I'm from the South, so I can talk for a very long time. But anyway, as you're joining, this is going to be a really exciting time today, guys. I actually have not one guest, but two guests. So obviously I'll be reintroducing Mary Eberle from DNA Hunters with me. She is once a month to talk about DNA. She will be on here with me as well, but we have a special guest with her and with me today. So I can't wait to get into our topic for today. So while you are finding me where you're coming from, let me know where you're watching from. I love maps. I grew up loving maps. I still do as a genealogist. And it also allows me to make sure that you guys are seeing me, hearing me, and can catch up with, or you're connecting with what's going on here as well. I am coming to you from my office in North Carolina. We have a beautiful fall day, still kind of warm summer temperatures, but still feels really nice outside. Starting to get a glimpse of fall finally. Wow. So we have Tampa, Florida. We have New Jersey here. We have Sandy Springs, Georgia, Athens, Georgia. Definitely. So we are on the East Coast here. Redmond, Washington. Hey, day. So we're over on the West Coast now. Perfect. So glad that you guys could join us. I really appreciate that. As you're coming in, let me just catch you up on a couple of things that are happening over on the website. If you may have seen in your inbox this week, I actually have a live webinar training that I am doing next Wednesday, September 20th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. It is called Cracking the Family Photo Code. So this is going to be like a 60 to 90 minute, somewhere in the webinar training where I'm going to be teaching you my step-by-step strategy that I use when I'm working with old family photos to be able to identify who is in them and how to be able to use those photographs to create my research plans going forward, because I believe that our family photographs can and should be essentially just like a document, a record source for our family history, just like a document. But we need to be able to understand what's in those photographs, who is in those photographs, and how to do that. So that is happening next Wednesday, September 20th, again, 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And with that, you do need to be registered. If you can't come live to watch that live, not a problem. Everybody who registers will be able to get the replay. I'll send out a link to the replay for that, which will be available for 90 days. And I have lots of bonuses with it. So I'm also including with that you'll be able to watch on your own, a copy of the ebook I have on identifying unknown ancestors in photographs. I have a video tutorial on using metadata and adding metadata to your photographs, your digital files. I have a special video on how to actually edit and clean up those family photos so that you can use them better, as well as another one on how to pull lots of examples and showing you step by step how to pull some of the information out of those old family photographs, how to really do a deep analysis in those as well. So lots of great kind of bonuses there as well. There is a small charge for this one, and I'm going to go ahead and I'll put the link into the chat. Oops, hang on one second. It's hard to do this and talk and do this at the same time. Hang on one second. All right, there it is. Okay. And I will I'll have it in the description. If you're watching this on YouTube, I will have it in the description as well once we're through with the live session here today. So there is the link coming in for the Cracking the Family Photo Code. I am so excited, guys. I love talking about family photos because there's so much we can use in them. All right, let's see where everybody is from. Lots of East Coast, West Coast, Oregon, Denver, Edinburgh, Scotland. Hey, Louise, so nice to see you today. Chula Vista, California, Colorado, another North Carolinian, yay, Illinois. So we have folks from all over. I always think that's really the cool thing, that I can sit here in my office and talk to people literally around the world. It gives me a little bit of a cool factor with my kids. So just so you know, they think that's pretty cool. All right, that's what's happening here in the Are You My Cousin world. And I also have a brand new blog post that will be coming out next week for you guys, and I will be emailing you about that as well. All right, let's talk DNA today, guys. Let's get right to it. I am going to bring on Mary Eberle. Now, you guys may know Mary. She shows up with me, has been here with me a lot. Hey, Mary, how are you?
Hi, Lisa. I'm great. How are you?
I am wonderful. Now, Mary is the founder and researcher at DNA Hunters, and she is a DNA expert. which I am not, which is why we get along so well together. She is my go-to DNA person, and she does come once a month with me to share about topics of genealogical topics related to DNA. So we recently did one last month on finding birth parents through DNA. And I'm going to put a link to that in the comments in just a moment. But we wanted to bring on another special guest today to talk about her journey of finding a birth parent with DNA and what she found when she tested with her DNA. And Mary and Lucinda are going to talk about the process that she went through. So let me bring Lucinda on. Are we there? Oh, we're there. Hey, Lucinda. So this is Lucinda Davis, and she worked with Mary. And after getting some rather interesting and confusing DNA test results, shall we say, and Mary was able to help her solve her family mystery, basically, that she ended up with. So I'm so excited to have them here. And so I really want to start off really with you, Lucinda. And I want you to if you could tell us a little bit about how did you get interested in really just pursuing your family history? I'm always interested to see what got people started.
Well, hi everybody. And I would say that my family research journey started in the 6th grade. A teacher inspired us to write a biography and include family history. And so, what are we, about 11 at that point, 11 or 12? And so I went to my mom and told her what my little class project was. And I had a little complication. My father had died when I was about 7 or 8. And so I was going to write it include bits about him, and I was going to include stuff about the family I was in at that point, which was a stepfather and a younger half-sister and my mom. And so when I went to asking her about my father, she could tell me a lot about their career, and she had married him in 1946. And I came along in 1957, and they had been in show business. So they were Latin dancers and magicians. She was a magician's assistant, he was a magician. And he, he came from Hispanic, California Indian, Native American, the Capistrano tribe, and also Spanish. He would always say he was Spanish, although his name was Davis. And there was a whole lot of intrigue and mystery. He lost his mother when he was young. He was orphaned young, and his father apparently wasn't in the picture. So she really had very little to tell me about it. But I held that thought from writing that biography about his life, and decided when I got to college, I had known one fact, that my grandfather Davis was a lawyer in LA, and there was some business or something going on regarding that. There's a little bit of scandal. So I started researching the Davis ancestry pretty strongly, and I learned, I'm named after my grandmother, Lucinda Rios, and my other grandmother, my mother's mother. And so I thought, well, I'm going to put these pieces together. So I began a paper research, and that went on for a long time. I met another woman who was researching the Rios ancestry, which was my grandmother, Lucinda Rios. And that continued on, and it got to the point where I got as far on paper, and then Ancestry became on the internet, and it seemed to cost a lot, but I thought it was worth it because I had all these burning questions and no answers. So I finally resolved, through Ancestry's help, the Davis ancestry as best I could understand it. Even found some missing pieces that nobody else knew about, and was really feeling pretty good about who and what I found, and understood my father better. And so 2011 came around, and I'm sharing all this information with my mother. And she sadly had an illness and passed away that year. And about that time, on the heels of that, she'd, you know, she'd never told me any differently, but I took a DNA test to just show how Irish I was, because she always said I'm Irish, and how Hispanic I was, and a little German thrown in there. And so, of course, Ancestry returns back, those early tests. I was 60% Scandinavian. and then some other nondescript thing, not even a hint of Hispanic in there, nothing. And I thought, well, maybe my Davis father was more Davis than he thought. He just looked Hispanic.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe pop up that photo for me if you could.
Oh, sure.
And so this is, whoops.
Hang on, it's coming, I think.
It was there and then it went.
It was there a minute ago. Hang on one second.
There it is.
There it goes. Okay, just a little slow.
So this is Wallace Davis, and so I thought, well, maybe he's just more whatever the Davises were, Welsh or Irish and Scottish, and not very, very much Hispanic and native, San Juan Capistrano Indian at all. And so I thought, okay, that's fine. And so then the next round where Ancestry started promising that, I started looking at matches and not really seeing much of anything. And so then I started watching as they would roll out enhancements to the Ancestry derivation. And still, the next time I did show up a little bit more English and Irish and some German stuff, and no Hispanic, no native. And I thought, well, if your grandparents are that, you have to do that.
Right. Lucinda, can I interrupt? I want to ask you real quick. So you were testing DNA. Really, you were really on the early end of things when it came to actually.
The minute it became affordable, I tested. It was like $120 or something.
Okay, yeah. So that was, we were talking about this beforehand. Mary, when did genealogists kind of jumped on the bandwagon with DNA testing? It was affordable around 2010, we think it was, somewhere in there. Am I?
Around then, maybe a little bit earlier.
Okay, all right. And then it got really fast with they just kept coming out with updates and more updates.
Exactly.
Okay.
So, I had so much fun finding out how Scandinavian I was that my husband, who is actually Scandinavian, I made him test. And he, it came out kind of, I was more Scandinavian than him. And so I at that point, I decided, really, this is probably not a very good test. That was my assessment.
Mm-hmm.
So I went and tested with family tree DNA too, to find those missing native and Hispanic roots. And on that test, I matched a guy fairly strongly named Michael Hill. And he was, I didn't really say where he was from. And I kept looking and it couldn't find anything that looked like anything I found on paper. And so I thought, okay, well, who knows? But I corresponded with some people with family tree and DNA. Then on Ancestry, they started getting a little better with how they were managing their DNA matches. As time, it's now like 2013 and 2014. And I just, I decided, well, why don't I start testing more of my relatives? So I had a half brother through this father, Wallace Davis, and although he had passed away rather young, I had nieces and nephews who were about my age, and both a nephew and a niece agreed to test.
Mm-hmm.
And so I paid for their test, and then some weird stuff started happening. I didn't match anybody I didn't show up as a match to either niece or nephew. And
What
I
were you,
thought, well, that's weird.
exactly? So what were you feeling with that? I mean, was it like, was it just
I
confusion?
was
Was it just,
I was still thinking that there was something wrong with my test.
okay.
You know, that I would call Ancestry and they'd say, well, maybe there's some things you don't know. And I was thinking, no, I know who I am. I know what my mother told me. And this is pretty much, at this point, I'm 56, 57 years old, right?
Mhm.
And it's like, no, your test is wrong. It's not me. And so um, the next part of the journey involved, watching, communicating with other people, finding. I had a newly discovered Davis relative agree to test, and she's
Mhm.
just a dear. And she tested, and she matches my niece and nephew, but not me.
Were
That's
you,
when I started getting really upset
I was going to
about
say,
the
were
whole
you,
thing.
were you
And
starting to kind of get an inkling that, hey,
I
there
was
is,
I'm still not believing. I mean, your mind will not believe
okay.
things that are right in front of your face if you have no context for it.
Hmm.
So the next thing that happened was a first cousin rolls in. On a first cousin I had no idea in South Carolina, just south of you, Lisa. And I thought, well, he reached out, he
Hmm.
started connecting. You can next if we I think I can I control the slides? Yeah, I can
Oh, you
control
can.
the slides.
I'll add them back. Hang on. I just took it down so we could see you a little
There we
better.
go. There we go. Okay, so this is my cousin Philip in South Carolina, and I owe a great deal to him for reaching out when he rolled in as a first cousin match, and we discussed things. And his mother was a Davis, and we thought, well, maybe we're double cousins or some weird thing like that,
Hmm.
because the Davises did seem to originate in South Carolina and Tennessee. And but Philip is a kind and gentle person by nature, and didn't put in the obvious. Like Lucinda, he did say once to me, "Are you sure you know everything about your parents?" And I said, "Yes, I know who I am." And then Henry Louis Gates had a wonderful show about finding his hidden ancestors in Western Virginia, and consulting C.C. Moore, the famous DNA genealogist. And I thought, well, okay. I went to the website and I found C.C. Moore's information, and I emailed her. And of course, she didn't respond back because she's a very busy lady solving crime, right? And but there were other references, and that's where Mary comes into the story. I I contacted Mary and I said, look, I have this great mystery and I can't figure it out, and it doesn't make any sense to me. And and I'm sure it's probably my wild Davis grandfather and that, but maybe you can shed some
So,
light.
so Mary, when Lucinda kind of came to you and you looked at her results, what was your, I know you well enough. What was your first impression when you saw that? What did you think?
Mhm. Well, initially I saw these matches like the Mr. Hill over on 23andMe and Philip on Ancestry, so I had to figure out, well, I had to make a tree for them to see how they were related to each other.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had some shared matches. So there were more distant matches, and who matched them, and they matched Lucinda. And I had those in a table along with how much DNA they shared with Lucinda.
Mm-hmm.
And
A lot.
a lot. And back then, companies like Ancestry, when they said what the possible relationships were, it was much more vague about what those possible relationships were, and they didn't give you any probabilities.
Mm-hmm.
And we did have tables. Like I went to a workshop that actually Cece taught, and like page 68, there was a table that showed you the range of DNA for each relationship and the average. And I'm putting it all together, referring back to that table, and all of a sudden it dawned on me that this relationship was very close, and that if indeed Philip was a first cousin, then one of his parents, and we knew which one because of those other matches, but that one of his parents had a sibling who would have been Lucinda's parent.
So how did you, you've obviously, this is going to be a very surprising, there's a shocking kind of result you have to share. How did you do that?
Right.
You want me to tell about that?
Sure, go ahead.
Kudos to Mary. She's the best possible person to tell shocking news you could ever have. Knowing she really intuitively knew me well enough and knew what I had done, that she had like a whole presentation prepared. And she unfolded it piece by piece, gently. It's like, first it was a description of how much centimorgans you're going to share with somebody, depending on the relationship. And then it was, I've done a little research, and I can't really find your parents in 1956. Do you have any idea where they'd be? And I've done a little research on the Owens family, and there are 3 possible candidates, and that this could be, and based on age, this particular candidate might be your biological father, but we can prove it if he had any other children or, some other ways. But it was so gentle, and it was more of like watching a mystery unfold. And I wasn't really taking in the shock of it fully at that moment, because she was explaining it so kindly, gently, scientifically, but with compassion.
And I would I could see Mary doing that, actually, definitely.
I had no idea.
Yes. So Mary, you've now broken that kind of, here's what we believe is happening. What were your next steps on this?
Well, I had seen that the most likely brother had some living children, and if he were Lucinda's birth father, then his children would be half siblings to Lucinda. And when you're half siblings, you share a lot of DNA. And their father had passed away at this point, so we couldn't ask him to test. And so I suggested, well, maybe one of these children of this person will test. And she was working with Philip, the first cousin. And, so that really made things go a lot more smoothly. If you can make those allies. And, luckily he was happy to reach out and to be helpful to try to figure out the connection. So Lucinda,
Lisa, can you show the next
Sure.
slide?
I'm adding it back. It's just going to take a minute or a moment here.
So this particular picture, or a very similar one, Mary goes, "Do you not see the family resemblance between yourself and this?" It's like, oh yeah, I thought it kind of looked familiar, but not that much. So this is Earl Owens, who is my biological father, and his son from his last marriage before he passed, Calvin, who Philip contacted, agreed to test, and within, I don't know, I've never seen Ancestor perform so speedy, but within 2 weeks we had the result that he was my half sibling.
Okay.
So it was a quick resolve. It doesn't actually. This whole thing made me question whether my mother was my mother.
I'm
and
sure.
and that's my mother. And but the sister I had grown up with, my half sister, she also agreed to test, proving that my mother was my mother. It was my father who wasn't my father, who is, Earl.
Right.
So that's my parents entertaining. There's another picture of Earl. I think that's the picture that you saw, Mary. That
Right.
made you think that it was this particular brother.
Right. And the fact that he was in the military, he had done time in California at the right time. So he, the other brothers were born in South Carolina, and all of them died in South Carolina, except for one who had died in Florida, which, did not connect back to your story. And, he, to me, seemed the most likely because of his ability to travel and where he had traveled to.
Exactly. He joined the army, I believe, when he was 19 or 20, and he was in the army for about 10 years, I think. Yeah, that would be about right. And in the course of time, he was in the Korean War, and he seemed to go to Fort Ord in Monterey, California, and I think that's where he crossed paths with my mother.
Okay.
And then he went to Germany, so, and then came back.
And Mary, that's not unusual. I think you've shared with me in the past that this kind of similar story that you have seen with other people you've worked with is one parent, the father usually having been in the military and moving around because they had that ability to move around, which kind of connects individuals who otherwise would never really cross paths.
Right. And oftentimes it's during the time of war. So I'm always looking at a date of conception and was the United States involved in a war at that time? And Ancestry does have some military records. And in this case, a photograph also. Somebody had, probably Philip, had this photograph attached to his profile. And, that's, it's just a common scenario.
Yeah.
That
makes sense.
I wasn't really wartime. I was after Korea, but leading into more of the Cold War and the Berlin Brigade sort of thing going on, where we're starting to get engaged with spying on each other at that point.
Right. And that's the kind of thing that really crosses, beyond DNA, but across all of our genealogy research, we have to understand what was happening in the world at that time. It's social history. You guys know I'm going to weave social history into pretty much everything I do, right? But it's important. We have to understand what was happening in the world and within, whether it's a local community or whether it is the greater world, such as wars and things like that, or that. So, all right, let me.
Right. And I just wanted to add, I was never a history student. I didn't like history, but now, with the internet and as it turns out, I do like some things about history, but it's really easy to figure out. Like, I had one more recent situation where somebody said that her mom was born in Germany, and it was in the 40s. So I looked up, I Googled when did World War II end, and it had ended, but there were American soldiers who remained in Germany.
Yes.
And and in the town where her mother was born. So it was an American soldier father, a German mother, and had I just stopped at the war was ended, everybody must have gone home. Had I stopped there, I would not have realized, like, oh wait, if he were in the U.S. Army, he could have been there during the conception and her birth.
A couple of historical things that are troubling for genealogists, and I ran into this, is there was a terrible fire, I think, in St. Louis, Missouri, and despite countless attempts, it appears that all of Earl Owens's, my biological father's, military records are gone. They were a lot was lost, and there are hit and miss things that were saved, but his service records are gone. So I couldn't place him at Fort Ord, but that's my intuition tells me that's what it was. That's
Mm-hmm.
that's where that's where it happened.
Right.
My parents being nomadic, my parents Wally and Shirley Davis were in the entertainment business, and they were probably performing in that area. I have records, uh, playbills of them being up in that part of the world, Monterey.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think you're right. So, Lucinda, let me ask you this. You had this all of a sudden this new to you family. How did you go about reaching out, or how did you react? Did you immediately reach out to them, or did you really have to kind of sit and process this at some level before you could actually reach out to have siblings? And how did that whole process work? I think sometimes we talk about finding things here on the YouTube live, or kind of in in genealogy DNA classes, but what did it look like when you actually had this information? What was next?
Well, it was absolutely easy initially for this process to happen. Uh, my brother Calvin, he this was Earl's only son, at least we found so far. I'd like to put that in. He was very anxious to meet what was a rumored lost sister.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why he very quickly tested when Philip was excited, thinking they found this lost sister that had been rumored about too. And and so he reached out to me.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't ready to talk for a few days, but only a few days.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty easy with new relationships and connections. I'm not shy. I'm not particularly introverted.
Mm-hmm.
And so we began about a 5-year relationship where I visited him, got to know him better. I have another sister through his mother. And although I've not met her in person, we had, telephone and email and social media exchanges.
Mm-hmm.
So it was that part was easy. I made 3 trips to South Carolina, met about probably 50 of my cousins, aunts, extended family. Had
Mm-hmm.
a wonderful, wonderful time. They were very welcoming, very, very welcoming. And one of the more humorous stories I can tell about that is where my grandfather, great grandfather Owens, founded a church, Pleasant Hill Baptist Church, down in Hemingway, Georgetown County.
Mm-hmm.
And we're standing there in the cemetery where all of the Owens ancestors are, and my father Earl was born there and buried there. And so we're standing at his grave, and my cousins are very concerned about how this is going to impact me. And so we're standing there, and being who I am, I just looked down there and looked at Earl's stone and said, "Earl, you and Shirley got some splaining to do." And that relieved all the tension. And
Oh, good.
it really wasn't terrible at all. I
Oh, good.
mean, there it was not difficult.
Oh, good.
Not difficult.
You had mentioned to me before we went live today, we were talking about the definition of family, and that now your definition of family has changed. Can you expound on that a little bit?
Yeah, yeah. First, first let me say that having said that they were extremely welcoming and gracious, and equally delighted by the surprise of finding a long lost relative. What I have learned, and this has been a tough lesson for me, is that some of these relationships don't last that long, no matter how much DNA you have in common.
Mm-hmm.
Family, people who are your family, are related to you in more than your biology. They're your shared values, your shared upbringing, um, your environment plays a great role as to who your family is to you. And although none of the Davises that I had grown up being related to are related to me biologically at all, they are deeply my family.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, my I have found in the course of this research in last 8 years, I have found 4 different half siblings, and although we are related very closely, DNA, I don't have a relationship with any of them like I have with the people who are my family. That was hard because I thought light is thicker than water. You're related to these people genetically. There's going to be all this stuff in common. It's not true.
Mm. That's interesting.
There are traits that are in common,
Right.
and there are some weird quirks that you find you have in common. There are eye color, hair waviness, all these things that are in common, but it's not really what family is. That is one of the warnings that they can't really spell out for you. But when you take a DNA test, they tell you might find a surprise. They don't tell you how to navigate the choppy waters of learning about new family. And I want to do a little plug here, if I can, for people who do find a parent that they weren't expecting and family they weren't expecting. There is a wonderful support group of 9,000 plus people who've shared this experience on Facebook called it was founded by Catherine St. Clair. It's DNA NPE Friends, the best club you never wanted to join. And they are a group of people. Catherine St. Clair founded it. This was how she dealt with her discovery. But there is varying level of support, and you learn the whole gamut from outright rejection of DNA says I'm your son, daughter, brother, sister, and outright rejection to welcoming to just navigating what family is. It's a lot. It's a lot to go through, and this group helps.
Can you give me the name of that group again? I want to put it in the chat.
It's called DNA space NPE, meaning not parent expected, friends on Facebook. It's private group, and so they one of the admins will talk to you about what it was that you discovered, and it's just called the best club you never wanted to join.
All right. I'll put that in the chat, guys. I didn't have the link, but you can, if anybody's interested, you can grab that and just search for that group on Facebook, and I'm sure it'll show up there as well. Well, Lucinda, I wanted to thank you so much for sharing your story, because it was a story that we talked really in a short period of time, but it really evolved over many years, and you've had to navigate those choppy waters of finding unexpected results. And I know that you actually wrote your memoir about that, and I could call The Magician's Daughter. And guys, that's actually, if you're interested, that's actually on Amazon. I'll put that in the, hang on, I'm gonna grab that. I'm gonna put that in the chat as well. So there's tons of stuff in the chat, guys. And if you're on YouTube, I will go back and add it to the description. So if you're watching this at a later date. Let me see, there's a question popped up here in the chat. Let me see. Lauren asked, how does a person get hold of Mary to hire her? Please, we'll be in the U.S. on our quest in December. I put it here. I'm going to put a link to her website right now, guys. She is at DNAHunters.com. I'm going to put the link in the chat. It's a great question, Lauren. And there you go. You can reach out to her on her website. Is that the best way, Mary? I cannot.
Sure. Or you can email me at mary@dnahunters.com.
Okay, I'll put that in there too. So
yeah. Otherwise, the website has a contact form.
Yeah. Okay. Hang on. Doctor.com. Okay. I've got an email address in there as well.
Sorry. I wanted to thank Lucinda too for sharing her story. I really appreciate it. We actually were highlighted in a local magazine here in Madison, Wisconsin. And Lucinda shared her story, and a couple other of my clients did. So that's another way to learn more about her.
Yeah, hang on, I'll grab that too, guys. I told you I had
lots of links today.
I had a lot of links to put in the chat. Link to Mary's DNA article. Yeah,
it's a great article. I wanted to just share one last little thing about this.
Sure.
It took me more than a year, maybe a couple years, to really wrap my head around this surprise. This sort of discovery in your life can cause a bit of identity trauma, as someone else put it. And, you know, if there are even psychology and counseling people available to help people through this. This is one of the dark sides of DNA, is that you learn things that you didn't expect to learn, and you're at varying levels of being able to take it in, especially if it's rejection from the newfound family. That makes it harder. I mean, I was lucky that way.
Well, I appreciate you sharing your story, and because I think that is a piece sometimes of the DNA research sometimes that we don't really talk about. We see a lot of the really cool stories that are highlighted on around the web and on social media. Sometimes we don't always recognize or remember that there's another side of those stories. Sometimes it isn't, for obvious reasons, you know, talked about as much. So thank you for that. And Sharon, I see. I called Lauren, but her name is Sharon. Actually, she's from. So thank you. I did catch that, Sharon, that your name is Sharon and not Lauren. All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you found this as fascinating as I did. Again, if you were watching this on replay, if you're watching on Facebook, all the links will be in the chat. If you're watching from YouTube at a later date, I'll have all these links that we have referred to into the descriptions, because I'm not convinced that they always transfer over. So I'll make sure they're in the description so you have those there. And just the last thing, just a quick reminder, next week, it is not too late to register, guys, for Cracking the Family Photo Code. That is my live webinar training next week. And would love for you to check it out and hope that you can join us there. So you guys have a great day, and I will see you in the future in a future live stream. Bye, guys.
Bye.